It was Thanksgiving 2015, and I was back at my parents' house in suburban Boston, Massachusetts. The air was thick with the aroma of roast turkey and pumpkin pie, the table groaning under the weight of dishes. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the room, but beneath the festive glow, tension hummed like a tight wire. My family had a way of mixing love with sharp edges, and I could feel it coming. Uncle Thomas, decked out in a designer suit that screamed his real estate success, leaned back in his chair. "Still dreaming about that restaurant, Scarlett?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The question hit like a spotlight, and suddenly every eye in the room was on me. Forks hovered, and the chatter died down. They were waiting for me to stumble. I took a breath and smiled, locking eyes with him. "Yes, I'm still at it," I said, my voice steady. "I own Harvest Table in Boston, and I just signed a deal to open 16 more locations across 4 states. The table exploded into laughter. Aunt Linda nearly choked on her wine, waving her hand like I'd told the best joke of the night. "Oh, Scarlett, you're too much! We saw you washing dishes at that diner last year." The others joined in, their chuckles cutting deeper than they knew. Then my father, James, stood up, his chair scraping the floor. His face was red, veins bulging at his temples. "Enough of this nonsense, Scarlett!" he bellowed, his voice booming over the room. "You're an embarrassment to this family." The words landed like a slap, public and raw. My throat tightened, a lump forming fast, but I clenched my jaw and stared at the table. No way was I letting them see me crack. Before I go on, I've got a question for you. Has your family ever underestimated your dreams? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. If you've ever faced family drama like this, give this a like, and don't forget to subscribe. I'm sharing every step of how I turned their doubts into dust. Hi everyone, I'm Scarlett, 35 years old, living in a buzzing neighborhood in Boston, Massachusetts. I own a chain of 17 restaurants now, but the road here? It was paved with skepticism from the people who were supposed to cheer me on the loudest. My own family. I grew up in a middle-class Boston family where stability was everything. My dad worked as a banker, my mom as an accountant, and they both preached the virtues of a secure job. They pushed me into a finance degree, which I completed, but my heart was never in spreadsheets. Instead, I found joy in my grandmother's kitchen. She'd hand me a wooden spoon, her eyes bright, and say, "Stir slowly, Scarlett. Let the flavors come to life." Her recipes sparked something in me. Cooking wasn't just a pastime, it was my calling. In 2014, I couldn't ignore that call any longer. I gathered all my savings and borrowed from my best friend to open Harvest Table in Boston. The restaurant was my dream brought to life. A cozy space with wooden tables, wildflowers in jars, and a farm-to-table menu featuring American dishes. I put my soul into every plate, from butternut squash ravioli with sage butter to maple bourbon pork belly that melted on the tongue. I wanted every bite to carry the love I felt for cooking. But those early days were brutal. Only a few customers trickled in, barely filling the dining room. Fresh ingredients drained my budget, and I struggled to keep up. Then came a devastating blow. A Boston Globe review called my food uninspired. Late at night, alone in the restaurant, I stared at that word on my phone. The criticism stung and doubt crept in. Had I made a terrible mistake? One rainy afternoon, my DAD called. "How's the restaurant, Scarlett?" he asked, his tone sharp, as if expecting me to admit failure. "It's tough," I replied, forcing my voice to stay calm. "But I'm figuring it out." He let out a heavy sigh. "Maybe you should look at other options." I hung up, frustration bubbling inside me. Why couldn't he believe in me? I channeled that anger into action, staying up late to perfect recipes, adding a hint of chili to the maple bourbon glaze to make it pop. Gradually, customers took notice. "This is amazing," one said, savoring a bite of pork belly. More tables filled each week, and hope started to grow. Everything shifted on a quiet Tuesday when Chef Carla walked in. She was a legend, a James Beard Award winner whose presence commanded the room. I served her my cider-glazed scallops, my hands shaking as I placed the plate before her. I'd spent weeks refining that dish, balancing the sweet tart glaze with the scallop's delicate flavor. From the kitchen, I watched her take a bite. Her eyes lit up and she beckoned me over. "This is outstanding," she said warmly but firmly. "You have talent, Scarlett, but you need to sharpen your focus." I could have wept with relief. Carla became my mentor, my guide. After hours, we'd sit together, tasting dishes as she offered pointed feedback. "Simplify," she'd say, nodding at a crowded plate. "Let the ingredients speak." Her tough love shaped me, and we'd work side by side, refining the menu. One evening, over a glass of wine, she looked at me and said, "You have a gift. Don't let anyone, not even your family, dull your shine." With her help, Harvest Table evolved. The dishes grew bolder, my confidence deepened, and the food became a true reflection of me. The turning point came with the Harvest Feast. I threw everything into it, inviting journalists, bloggers, and influencers. That day, I was a nervous wreck, checking every detail obsessively. The highlight was my sweet potato gnocchi, soft and earthy, finished with sage butter. As the first plates went out, I held my breath. Then it happened. An influencer posted a photo, the gnocchi glowing under the restaurant's warm lights. The post went viral on Instagram, racking up likes and shares. By the end of the night, the dining room hummed with excitement, every plate cleared. Reservations poured in, booked weeks out. Harvest Table wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. As I stood in the bustling restaurant, watching a full house, pride swelled in my chest. I had taken my passion, fought for it, and built something real. The doubts, the struggles, the skeptics, they hadn't stopped me. This was only the beginning. From 2016 to 2025, I turned Harvest Table into a brand that stretched across the country. It started with Coastal Table in San Francisco. I remember standing in the kitchen on opening night, the fog rolling in over the bay as we plated Dungeness crab cakes with lemon aioli and grilled octopus with fennel salad. The line of customers stretched down the block, and my heart raced with pride. Each dish was a love letter to the Pacific, and the city embraced it. Then came Urban Harvest in Austin, where I leaned into bold Texan flavors like smoked brisket with peach BBQ sauce and jalapeno cornbread. The locals loved it, and soon we were a staple of the city's food scene. Prairie Feast in Minneapolis followed, a cozy spot with hearty dishes such as wild rice soup and walleye with herb butter. Watching customers huddle over steaming bowls during the first snow of the season felt like magic. With each new restaurant, the Harvest brand grew stronger, known for its commitment to sustainability and warm, inviting spaces. But growth wasn't without pain. Managing 17 locations meant sleepless nights, constant travel, and the weight of hundreds of employees relying on me. I loved it, but it was exhausting. In 2023, I received a call that stopped me in my tracks. The American Restaurant Association wanted to honor me as Culinary Entrepreneur of the Year. Me, the girl who was told she'd never make it. I flew to Chicago for the ceremony, my hands trembling as I accepted the award. Standing on that stage, looking out at chefs I admired and industry leaders, I felt a surge of gratitude. "This is for every dreamer who's been doubted," I said in my speech. "Keep going." A few months later, Bon Appetit reached out for a feature. They sent a photographer to my Boston restaurant, capturing me in my chef's coat, tasting dishes and chatting with staff. When the issue came out, I bought 10 copies, laughing at how surreal it felt. There I was, on glossy pages, my story laid bare. Scarlett's Harvest, a culinary revolution. I framed it and hung it in my office, right next to my grandmother's wooden spoon. Success had also brought me a beautiful apartment in Boston with a view of the skyline that took my breath away. It was a far cry from the tiny studio I'd rented when I first started, but even in that luxurious space, I kept my grandmother's spoon on the counter as a reminder of where it all began. But success didn't mean the challenges stopped. New York was supposed to be my triumph. I'd opened Harvest Table in the heart of Manhattan, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a menu that married city sophistication with rural charm. 6 months in, though, the numbers were bleak. Reservations dropped and critics were lukewarm. I flew in, determined to fix it. Walking through the dining room one evening, I overheard a couple at table 5. "It's fine, but nothing special," the woman said, pushing her plate aside. My stomach churned. This wasn't just a restaurant. It was my reputation on the line. I gathered the team, my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. "We need to rethink our approach," I said. "What makes New York unique?" We brainstormed, and the idea hit me. A menu that changed with the seasons, sourced from upstate farms. I spent weeks visiting suppliers, tasting heirloom vegetables, artisanal cheeses, and heritage meats. Back in the kitchen, we crafted dishes like roasted beet salad with goat cheese and walnuts, and braised short ribs with parsnip puree. The relaunch was a gamble, but it worked. The dining room filled again, and a glowing review in the New York Times sealed the deal. Harvest Table has found its soul. I framed that review too, a reminder that resilience pays off. Through it all, I'd changed. The Scarlett who once sought her family's approval was gone. I'd learned to trust myself, to lead with confidence, to create something meaningful. My family's doubts had fueled me, but I no longer needed their validation. I had built a life, a career, a legacy, and yet, as I stood in my Boston apartment, watching the city lights, I couldn't help but wonder if they'd ever acknowledge what I'd achieved. Part of me still hoped for that, but I knew that even if they didn't, I was enough. It was 2025, and the world felt like it was teetering on the edge. The stock market had crashed, again, leaving a trail of shattered dreams in its wake. I'd caught snippets of it on the news, but I was too busy running my restaurants to dwell on it. My business, Harvest Table, was my pride and joy. 17 locations now, each one a brick in the empire I'd built from nothing. I'd proven myself against all odds while others gambled and lost. Then, one chilly October morning, my phone buzzed. It was Mom, Ellen, her voice quivering like she was holding back tears. "Scarlett, we need to see you. It's urgent." My gut twisted. We hadn't been close lately, not since the last stilted Christmas, but something in her tone told me this was different. The next day, they showed up at Harvest Table in Boston, Mom, Dad, James, and Rachel. I spotted them through the glass doors as they approached. Rachel, my older sister, 40 now, looked like she'd aged a decade overnight. Her designer coat hung loose on her frame, and her eyes were swollen from crying. Dad, the unshakable banker, shuffled behind her, his head bowed like he carried the weight of the world. Mom's face was pinched with worry. I met them at the entrance, forcing a smile, and led them to a quiet table in the corner. The restaurant was still empty, the lunch crowd hours away, but the air felt thick with tension. Dad didn't beat around the bush. He leaned in, his hands clasped so tight his knuckles whitened. "Scarlett, we're in trouble," he said, his voice rough. "Rachel, she's bankrupt. The stock market crash. It destroyed her." I flicked my eyes to Rachel, who wouldn't meet my gaze. She just sat there, shredding a napkin into tiny pieces. "She mortgaged our house in New Jersey," Dad went on, his words faltering. "Invested it all in some high-risk fund. The bank's foreclosing. We're going to lose it. Everything." His voice cracked on that last word, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. The house in New Jersey, the one they'd lived in since I was a kid, the one I'd run around in barefoot, was slipping away because of Rachel's gamble. Rachel finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought I could make it big," she said, tears spilling over. "I thought I'd prove myself like you did, Scarlett, but I messed up. I'm so sorry." She dissolved into sobs, and Mom reached over, rubbing her back like she was a child again. Then Dad did something that stopped me cold. He bowed his head, his gray hair catching the light. "Scarlett, you're our last hope," he murmured, so quiet I almost missed it. I stared at him, then at Rachel, who lifted her tear-streaked face. "I know I don't deserve it," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't believe in you. Those times I laughed at your restaurant idea, said you'd make a fool of yourself. I was wrong. You're incredible, and I need you now." Her words slammed into me, and I froze. I could still hear her voice from years ago, sharp and mocking. "A restaurant? You're going to embarrass yourself." She'd stood there, all smug and superior, while I scraped by, pouring everything into my dream. Now here she was, begging, and I didn't know whether to feel smug or sick. Pride swelled in my chest. I'd made it, built something real, while her high-flying schemes had crashed and burned, but resentment simmered right alongside it. Why should I save her? Why should I fix their mess after they'd dismissed me? I swallowed hard, keeping my face blank. "What do you need?" I asked, my voice cooler than I meant it to be. Mom jumped in, her hands fluttering nervously. "Money," she said, "to pay off the mortgage. If we don't, the bank takes the house by the end of the month." Rachel nodded, reaching out like she might grab my hand, but I didn't move. "I know I've been awful," she said, "but please, Scarlett, I'm begging you." Dad just sat there, silent, his eyes pleading. I looked at them, my family, broken and desperate, and felt a storm raging inside me. Part of me wanted to walk away, to let them figure it out, but another part couldn't shake the image of that house, of Mom and Dad with nowhere to go. I'd fought too hard to let spite win now. "I need time," I said at last, standing up. "This isn't simple." Dad nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. Rachel just stared at me, gratitude and guilt warring on her face. They left a few minutes later, their footsteps echoing in the empty dining room. I stood there alone, the weight of their words pressing down on me, wondering what the hell I was going to do. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the dishwasher in the kitchen. I sat at the dining table, a half-empty glass of wine in front of me, staring at the wall. My mind was a battlefield. Pride and pain clashed inside me, each vying for dominance. I'd proven them wrong. My family, who'd laughed at my dreams, who'd called me foolish for chasing a restaurant instead of a real career. I'd built an empire from nothing, and now they needed me. Part of me wanted to savor that, to let them see how far I'd come without their help, but another part ached, raw from the memories of their cutting words, the dismissal that still stung. Why should I help them now? Why, after everything? I thought back to Rachel's face at the restaurant, tear-streaked and desperate. "I didn't believe in you," she'd said, her voice cracking. "I was wrong." Those words echoed in my head, mingling with the old ones. "You're going to embarrass yourself." I clenched my fists, frustration bubbling up. I'd worked so hard to bury that hurt, to build a life that didn't need their approval. And yet, here I was, tangled up in their mess, questioning whether to throw them a lifeline. That night, I lay in bed next to David, my husband, staring at the ceiling. He'd been quiet since I told him about the meeting, letting me stew in my thoughts. Finally, he turned to me, his voice gentle. "You're going to help them, aren't you?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to, but another part, I'm still so angry." He nodded, understanding. "You have every right to be. They didn't support you when you needed it most." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But if you do help, make sure you protect what you've built. They need to learn from this, Scarlett. Don't let them take advantage of you again." His advice was practical, grounded, like him. I leaned into his shoulder, grateful for his steady presence. "I just don't want to regret it," I whispered. "Whatever you decide," he said, kissing my forehead. "I'm with you." The next morning, I called Clara. She'd been more than a mentor. She was the one who'd believed in me when no one else did. Over coffee at a small cafe near her apartment, I spilled everything. She listened, her eyes thoughtful, sipping her espresso. When I finished, she set her cup down and smiled softly. "I know what it's like," she said. "My family didn't think I'd make it either. They wanted me to be a lawyer, not a chef. When I opened my first restaurant, they called it a hobby." She chuckled, but there was a hint of sadness in it. "It hurt, but I learned something important. Forgiveness isn't for them. It's for you. Holding on to that anger only weighs you down." I nodded, absorbing her words. "But," she added, her tone firm, "forgiveness doesn't mean letting them walk all over you. Set boundaries. Help them. But make it clear this is a one-time thing. They need to respect what you've built." Her advice mirrored David's, and it settled something in me. Maybe I could help without losing myself in the process. Later that day, I took a walk along the Charles River, the autumn leaves crunching under my boots. The air was crisp, and the city buzzed around me, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought about my journey, how I'd started as a dishwasher in a dingy diner, scrubbing grease off pans while dreaming of something more. I remembered the first time I'd stepped into Harvest Table, the smell of fresh paint and possibility. I'd clawed my way up, through sleepless nights and near failures, to build 17 restaurants that bore my name. My worth wasn't tied to their approval. It never had been. I'd proven that to myself 1,000 times over. But family was complicated. They'd hurt me, yes, but they were still my blood. And somewhere beneath the resentment, I didn't want to see them suffer. By the time I got home, the decision had crystallized. I'd help them, pay off the mortgage to save the house, but I'd do it on my terms. I'd transfer the deed to my name to protect it from future recklessness. And Rachel? She'd have to earn her way back. I'd offer her a job at Coastal Table in San Francisco under my supervision and insist she take financial management courses. It wasn't charity. It was a chance to rebuild, with guardrails. I wouldn't let their mistakes derail what I'd worked so hard to achieve. As I sat down to draft the email to my parents, outlining my conditions, a weight lifted. I wasn't the scared girl they'd once dismissed. I was Scarlett, the woman who'd built an empire from scratch, who'd learned to stand tall even when the ground shook. Helping them didn't mean I needed their approval. It meant I was strong enough to choose compassion over spite, and that, I realized, was the truest measure of success. It was a chilly November evening, and Harvest Table was closed to the public. I dimmed the lights, letting the glow of candles cast a warm, intimate ambiance over the dining room. The table was set with care, crisp white linens, polished silverware, and a centerpiece of autumn leaves and gourds. I'd cooked a meal that took me back to our family's roots: roasted chicken with rosemary and lemon, mashed potatoes with gravy, and green beans almondine. For dessert, a rich chocolate tart, my grandmother's recipe, waited in the kitchen. As my family arrived, I greeted them at the door, hugging Mom and Dad and offering Rachel a small, tentative smile. We settled around the table, and for a moment, silence hung heavy. The soft jazz in the background and the clinking of glasses couldn't hide the weight of what we all knew was coming. I took a deep breath and started. "I've thought a lot about what you asked," I said, meeting their eyes one by one. "And I've decided to step in." Mom's hand flew to her mouth, and Dad's shoulders relaxed just a little. "I've paid off the mortgage," I went on. "The house is safe now." Rachel's fingers tightened around her napkin, her eyes wide. "But," I added, my voice firm, "I've transferred the deed to my name. It's the only way to make sure this doesn't happen again." Dad nodded slowly, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. "And Rachel," I said, turning to her, "I'm giving you a chance to start over. I want you to work as a manager at Coastal Table in San Francisco. You'll also need to take financial management courses. This is your shot, but you have to take it seriously." Rachel looked at me, and I saw something shift in her expression. Gratitude, maybe, or resolve. "Thank you, Scarlett," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I promise I won't let you down." Then Dad spoke up, his words rough with emotion. "Scarlett, I've been wrong about you. I didn't believe in what you could do, and I'm sorry. You've made me so proud." He reached out, his hand finding mine across the table. Mom stood and came around to wrap me in a hug, her arms trembling slightly. "We're sorry, sweetheart," she murmured into my hair. "We should have trusted you all along." I hugged her back, feeling tears prick my eyes. It wasn't everything fixed, not yet, but it was a step. As we ate, the mood lightened. Laughter bubbled up over stories of the past, and Rachel even teased about how she'd probably spill coffee her first day at Coastal Table. For a fleeting moment, it felt like the family we used to be, imperfect, but together. Later, as I cleared the plates and stood in the kitchen, I glanced back at them through the pass. They were still talking, their voices mingling with the clatter of dishes. That's when it hit me. Their doubt, as painful as it had been, lit a fire in me. It pushed me to build something they couldn't ignore. But seeing them now, apologizing and trying, I realized family could heal. It took honesty and time, and maybe a few scars would always remain, but sincerity could bridge even the widest gaps. Before I go, I've got something for you. Has your family ever doubted your passion? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you think success is the strongest way to prove them wrong, and subscribe for more stories about resilience and finding your way.